Make my wife uncomfortable. I destroy your business. It's simple. A few months back I moved into a new apartment with only street parking. Now in Korea they have laws about street parking. You can't park in front of a doorway. You can't park on the sidewalk. You can't park blocking a crosswalk. Also, if there's a solid yellow line you can't park there either. Outside of that, you're pretty much good to go. So we moved to this apartment. It was street parking only, but for the price we were paying I was willing to deal without having a dedicated parking spot. Across from my home is a restaurant. That's more akin to a bar than anything else. I could tell it wasn't doing well. Well, one day I park in a legal spot and the owner of the restaurant comes out and goes, "That's customer parking." I look at him and look at the parking spot and go, "That's street parking. It doesn't belong to anyone." He goes, "That's my restaurant parking." And I go, "I don't care, it's a street parking." To which he says, "You must move your car," to which I tell him to call the cops. If it's really his spot, the police will enforce the law and I'll get a ticket. Hint. He didn't call the cops. He didn't call the cops cause he knew I was right. One day my wife calls me. Says she can't park cause something blocking her way. I come downstairs and move the chair that was put in the parking spot to prevent people from parking. She parks. Guy comes out angry, sees me, he knows the deal. He knows I know the rules. He knows I'm not going to play his game, so he walks back in. A few weeks later the guy sees my wife about to move the chair. And he goes and sits in it and makes my wife park around the block. My wife isn't nearly as confrontational as me. I get home. She tells me what happened. I go talk to the guy and I tell him I'm done playing games. The parking spot doesn't belong to him, it's first come first serve, and if he ever beeps with my wife again it's game on. He laughs. I think the message stuck with him for a while. Cause he let us be. Then about a month passes. And my wife is alone and he yells at my wife to not park there. By this point COVID-19 cases in Korea are quite high and new strict measures are put into place. I know for a fact this guy is locking his doors when curfew hits and letting his customers party late in the evening. So one Friday evening at 10:30, which is 30 minutes past curfew, I walk over to his restaurant door, put my ear on the door, and I can hear music and laughing. So I call the cops. They come over, kick everyone out, and find the restaurant. I repeat this process 2 times over the course of the last 6 weeks. Each time sneaking out at night. After curfew. Seeing if they are violating the rules. And if they are, reporting them. Each time the cops came. Ticketed and fined them with increasingly strict penalties. Today I noticed the restaurant is shuttered and closed. I asked the next door business what happened. They said the landlord got tired of the police complaining to him about his tenant and apparently the business was behind on rent, so they kicked them out. Now my wife doesn't have to worry about them harassing her. I live in Korea too. And this practice drives me peeping nuts. What's even more amazing? Most Koreans just accept it. And if a restaurant / bar / whatever blocks off street spaces or tells them to move, they just do it. No argument. Good on you for standing up to the dude. I moved to Chicago back in 2012 and there's a common practice there of people saving parking spots with chairs during the winter months because parking is really bad from snow / people not moving cars for snowplows. It blew my mind that it's an actual thing. I moved a chair once and parked and ended up with a broken side door window. So stupid. People are so speepty. Manager wouldn't let me leave to catch the shuttle early. First post, but here goes. This was a few years ago now. It was my first job out of college and I was an administrative assistant for some people. One of which was my direct boss. She very obviously didn't like me. There were tons of issues and false reporting. Including assuming that any screw up was my fault. I don't know why. There was never a past incident to make her think that. She never believed me when things got cancelled or when things weren't received on time. But I always had the email chains to prove it, to which she always said it wasn't my fault this time. Anyways. I had to shuttle from my parking lot to the office building. The shuttle ran every 15 minutes but tends to get there early. Now in this role, I didn't have a formal time punch to clock in on. Instead I would put my hours in a timesheet at the end of the week. I always filled the timesheets in the same. Putting 8A4. 30p to total my 40 hours. But I tended to leave the physical building a few minutes before 4:30 so I could catch the 4:30 shuttle. The other co-supervisor type of person knew this and said it was fine. One day I get a call while I'm on the shuttle to handle something in the office. I apologize and say that I had already left for the day and was on the shuttle. She said, "It's 4:27. You should be working until exactly 4:30. I explained that I leave a few minutes early to catch the shuttle. Otherwise I would have to wait for the next one to come at 4:45, and it was made clear I wasn't paid for when I stayed past 4:30. I also explained that I also get in before exactly 8 a.m. so I was confident it made up the difference. She didn't believe me and wanted me to start recording exact time in and to stay until exactly 4:30. At the same time also, I was not allowed to exceed my 40-hour work week. So I did. I started putting in the exact time that I got into the office in my timesheet. And as it turns out, I was getting in way sooner than the few minutes I was leaving early to catch the shuttle. Friday comes and I can't work more than my assigned 40 hours. I tell her that I need to leave early today to make sure that I was still at the hour cap. Since I was coming in a few minutes early every day and not leaving until exactly 4:30, I had to leave about a half hour early that week. She was annoyed for sure, but let it go. This went on for a couple of weeks. But one week we had an event I had to come in early to help with. That early arrival plus my usual early time into the office meant that I had to leave a full 90 minutes early on Friday in order to keep my 40-hour standard. It just so happened that this Friday was when we had a new team member move into our offices. I was helping with the office setup and told her I had to go. It wasn't even 3 o'clock and I was in the middle of a task. I explained that if I stayed longer I would be over my 40 hours and would need to be paid for overtime. Now she was pissed. She said there is no reason I should leave this early. I explained that per her request I have been keeping track of when I arrive at the office and also not leaving until exactly 4:30 during the week. But since I was not overtime eligible I needed to leave now. And she was left to finish moving the new person in by herself. Unfortunately, aside from this one small victory, nothing changed. I requested a meeting with HR, not reporting her yet but hoping to work it out. And my manager came with documentation arguing I was performing poorly. I pointed out flaws in her documentation. But the HR rep said that since I didn't have paperwork to prove it, she sided with my manager. For our next meeting with HR, I was prepared and brought an extensive folder of documentation to show my side of the story per HR's request. And they told me we didn't need to look at my documentation because it wasn't important or relevant. Towards the end of the meeting I asked what I was supposed to do next. The HR member said to let it be. Or just quit. The very next day I put in my notice. I used to eat lunch at my desk and work past my 8 hours. My husband and I worked pretty close in the same city, so we drove just one car to work. He would drop me off and pick me up. As a result I was in early and left late. So to pass time in the evening waiting for my husband I would sit at my desk and read, but I was off the clock. If the phone rang or someone stopped by with a question I would help. Until one day my supervisor said someone I know, it was the head of IT, said I was spending work time with my feet up and reading. I explained it was after my shift and I was waiting for my husband. She understood. But from that day forward until COVID and my role changed, I left my desk for 30 minutes for lunch and spent the time waiting for my husband in one of the comfy lobby chairs. Reading. No more free work for me if someone was going to be a jerk about me being available after I clocked out. I once worked in a restaurant that was on a main route in and out of Philadelphia. Consequently we had many people who lived in the city and took the bus to get to work. One night everything you could think of went wrong and we were late in closing. Harris, his real name, because Peep, that obnoxious prick, caught a busboy going out to catch the bus. He told him he couldn't leave until everyone else left. Said busboy advised him that if he missed the last bus he could not get home. Harris said, "It's not my problem." Busboy makes a move for the door and Harris decides to stand in his way. For a second, busboy lays Harris out with a single punch and proceeds to catch the bus. We saw him one more time. When he came to pick up his last check, he was greeted with a resounding round of applause from the whole staff. Except Harris. Had a job that would tend to let out 10 minutes after the last bus. No malicious compliance. But I did negotiate some taxi rides in exchange for me not taking off before the end. Just a quick comment as someone that's been involved with large corporations for a few decades. HR will almost never be on your side. No matter what they say. They are there to protect the company. Not you. Sucks. I know. But it's true. Denied a raise and moved to overnight position and told don't care how you do your job. Just do it, okay? I will. I used to work in hotels in a ski town in Colorado. Very expensive, but the quality of life. Very common saying there. I had started at a new hotel and was making $10 an hour living with my brother in a 2-bedroom place that was 700 square feet. Rent was half our income. When the slow season approached, I was told I would have to move to night audit 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. or risk being let go. The problem was I lived 3 miles from the hotel and took the bus to get there. Since I couldn't afford a car, the bus did not run at night or early morning, so I would be walking 6 miles a day and several inches to a foot or more in snow. So I asked for a raise. They said they'd get back to me but need an answer and I need the job, so okay, I'll work night audit. I start the next week as an auditor, and while I'm being trained I learn that I'm also losing a day. The other auditor works 3 days and I'll be working 4 days. Not 5. That's $320 a month hit to my income before taxes. So I'll need to be making $12.50 an hour to keep making the same thing with the cut hours. But I decide I'm going to ask for 14. I complete training and meet with the GM. He asks how I'm liking it, and I start off with my concerns. I tell him I wasn't told I'd lose a day, and with having to walk 6 miles a day in the snow, I was going to need a raise to 14 an hour. He let out an audible sigh and then tells me he can easily hire someone for this position for 10 an hour and to take it or leave it. I knew it would be very hard to find a job in the winter when everything closes up, so I stayed. As I walked out of his office, he says, "I don't care how you do your job. Just do it." Okay. I will. You see, this job was easy. It was 7 hours of me doing absolutely nothing and 1 hour of actual work, which gave me plenty of time to find shortcuts. The software we used allowed us to import scripts that you downloaded from the developer's site. One such script was a way to make my job literally one click. The problem was it was $500 a year license for it. Obviously I wouldn't propose to my GM a way to eliminate my job. But there was a free trial on every script for 7 days. I remember at the time you get around paywalls on news websites by going into the web console and simply removing the paywall from the source code. I decided to see if this was something I could do with this script. And what do you know? I downloaded it and opened the script in a text editor, and the only thing making the script a trial was a line that said, "License exp," and had the date set 7 days out from when I downloaded it. I changed the computer's date to 8 days from now and tried to run the script in our software, yet got a notification that said the free trial had ended. So I changed it back and set the expiration date to 2050. This took my manual job of 1 hour and made it 3 to 5 minutes. All I had to do was specify a date range and check off what reports I wanted done and print it and click start. That was it. I always manually reviewed everything just in case. But that wasn't it. We had a kitchen where we made breakfast and dinner for the guests. Evening shift got free dinner. And morning shift got free breakfast. I didn't get anything. They eventually decided to have the auditors set up breakfast so the kitchen crew didn't have to come in as early. I asked if we got free breakfast and was told no, despite setting up everything to make their jobs easier. I should also note that we had to clean any dishes left from dinner that the kitchen didn't get to, despite not even getting any dinner. But I had the kitchen all to myself for 6 hours. So I started making myself dinner around 1 a.m. Whatever I wanted. The only limits were the ingredients in the kitchen, and since I was responsible for dishes from other shifts, I never left any evidence behind. I no longer had to buy food to bring to work. I later realized that I could put dirty dishes back in the return bin since it was covered, and the breakfast crew never checked to see if any dirty dishes were in it, and the very few times they did check, they assumed dinner forgot to check before leaving. I always cleaned up the dishes I used making myself food out of fairness though. So now my job no longer requires me to do dishes. I get free food. And all I have to do is remember the date and click a button to do my actual job. What am I to do with all this time? I watched so many shows. I played online games on my laptop. I started learning Spanish. The GM did say he didn't care how I did my job. Just do it. And so I did. I did eventually decide to move away for a much better job far away and had to give up the comfy life. I trained my replacement the way I was doing things, including the script, and did not teach him the manual way. Before I left though, I decided to change the trial date to 1 week out. 2 days after my last day, the front desk manager texts me and tells me that the other auditor was just fired for making racist remarks to a guest, and that guest recorded him, so he was fired once the GM got in. He asked if I could come back until they got someone else and said they'd pay me 15 an hour. Unfortunately, I was leaving in 2 days, so there was no way. I got a call from the GM at about 5 a.m. the day of the expiration, and he asked about this free trial thing and why wasn't the new guy trained how to do the audit properly, who was apparently working 7 days a week since no one else knew the audit except the new guy and of course me. I reminded him that he told me he didn't care how I did my job. Just do it. So I did exactly that. I could tell he wanted to yell, but he held back. He then demanded I come back and fix it or he'll have to take legal action. I told him I was already at my new place too. miles away, but I would happily do it for airfare. A free room. Free meals while I'm there. And 10. That was when he lost it and I hung up. He texted me after saying he was contacting the lawyers and that I've peeped up and prepare to face the consequences. That was 5 years ago and I haven't heard anything from him since. I did eventually go back to that town a few months ago to see my mom and ran into the front desk manager from that place, who is a really nice guy. He told me the GM was caught peeping the head housekeeper in his office by his wife one day. Later divorced him. The 19-year-old girl working the front desk in the mornings later filed sexual harassment charges against him and he resigned after that. The AGM jumped ship after that. The GM was also a coach for a baseball team and hit a kid with a metal bat, breaking his arm and got his speep rocked by the dad. Not sure what happened to him after that. The front desk manager now runs the place as GM and he's made sure that the AGM, and the FDM are all trained to do the audit. It's so hard to take your bosses seriously once you find out how full of speep they are. They abused you. No wonder you had to find ways to reward yourself. I love the armchair lawyering at the end, where he's going to go after you in court for him not doing his job. Not surprised you never heard another peep. Ski town in Colorado and things would be closed up? I'm a little confused. Winter is ski season and it's prime tourist time. The revenge of the Marconi operators. I went to a strict private school growing up. Someone decided that the school children weren't eating their lunch during the lunch period because we were talking too much. The school responded by outlawing talking during lunch. We all filed into the lunchroom and ate lunch in silence like little criminals. Lunch was one of the few periods where we were allowed to talk anyway. So being forced to eat lunch in silence made the day very dull and sad. The lunch ladies placed little red blocks in the middle of our lunch tables as visual indicators that we weren't allowed to talk. And kids who were caught talking or passing notes had recess taken away. Well, this was an old school with a huge library of old books. School administration found out the hard way that knowledge is power. At some point in the distant past, Morse code must have been taught as an elective, because there were still a complete set of instructional books in the library. I was a huge history fan, and I knew about Morse code from reading about the Titanic. I pitched my idea to my friend group. Our teacher said we couldn't talk or pass notes, but they never said no Marconi. We decided the best way to make dashes and dots was to tap messages on the table with any hard object we had available or knuckles. Hand signals were also used to indicate the pause between complete letters. We took turns tapping out messages, using the code books as quick reference, and memorized them in our spare time. The activity became so popular with my class that you had to be looking at the person who was sending the message. There was so much tapping going on at adjacent tables. Table-to-table communication was nearly impossible. As you can imagine, sending the message took a long time and normally consisted of only a few short words, often with confusing results. But skirting the rules was most of the fun. The lunch ladies didn't know what we were doing at first, and probably just thought we were idly tapping things on the table. One of them finally noticed one of our code books. Her eyes got real big, and a light bulb went on. A few days later, the blocks were gone, and we were allowed to talk again. Soon the school was overrun by rival gangs of tap dancers tapping each other out with profanities and threats. Or this is the story of how somebody on staff won 20 by betting she could trick you all into learning Morse code without teaching any lessons on it. D. My elementary school did this. You had 3 strikes. If you got too loud it would be a week no talking. We just ate and sat with our heads down until lunch was over. I wish we had thought of this at our school. We weren't allowed to talk or sit by our friends. We ended up just skipping going to lunch and eating in nice